Title: Prison Gangs That Control New York, USA Jails. Help this channel grow. Like the video, leave a comment, subscribe, and don't forget to turn on your notification for our next real-life prison stories. This helps us a lot. Thank you. The story begins. The invisible empire behind bars. The steel door slams shut with a sound that echoes through concrete corridors. Inside New York's correctional facilities, a parallel government operates beneath the surface of official authority. This isn't fiction. This is the documented reality of how prison gangs have established control over some of America's most notorious jails and prisons. New York's correctional system houses over 40,000 inmates across state prisons and city jails. Within these walls, organized criminal enterprises don't simply exist, they govern. According to public records and investigative reports, gang-affiliated inmates comprise a significant portion of the incarcerated population in facilities from Rikers Island to Attica. These organizations operate with hierarchies, rules, and enforcement mechanisms that rival legitimate governments. The power structure inside New York's correctional facilities didn't emerge overnight. It evolved over decades, shaped by street conflicts, ethnic tensions, racial divisions, and institutional failures. Understanding this ecosystem requires examining not just who these gangs are, but how the system itself created conditions for their rise. The genesis of institutional gang power. New York City's jail system, particularly Rikers Island, became a breeding ground for gang consolidation during the 1980s and 1990s. As crack cocaine devastated urban communities, arrest rates skyrocketed. Young men affiliated with street organizations found themselves incarcerated together in unprecedented numbers. What began as neighborhood crews transformed into sophisticated prison networks. According to former Department of Correction officials and investigative journalism, the chaos of overcrowding created power vacuums. When institutions couldn't maintain order, inmates established their own. Gang leaders provided what the system failed to deliver: protection, structure, and a sense of belonging in an environment designed to strip away identity. The transition from street gang to prison organization required adaptation. On the streets, gangs controlled territory measured in blocks. Behind bars, territory became dormitories, cell blocks, and recreation yards. The economics shifted from drug corners to contraband pipelines. The violence remained, but the motivations evolved. Survival, respect, and institutional power became paramount. The major players in New York's prison landscape. Several dominant organizations have established themselves as controlling forces within New York's correctional facilities. Public records, court documents, and investigative reports identify the primary groups operating behind bars. The Bloods organization represents one of the most significant presences in New York jails and prisons. Originating in Los Angeles but taking deep root in New York during the 1990s, the Bloods aren't a monolithic entity. They operate through various sets, semi-autonomous factions that maintain the broader Blood identity while controlling their own operations. According to law enforcement testimony and court records, sets like the Nine Trey Gangsters, Sex Money Murder, and the Guerrilla Stone Bloods have established substantial influence within correctional facilities. These blood sets operate through hierarchical structures. Court documents reveal that leadership positions include shot callers who make decisions, enforcers who carry out orders, and soldiers who handle daily operations. Communication between incarcerated leaders and street operations occurs through visits, contraband cell phones, and coded messages, methods documented in numerous federal prosecutions. The Crips, the Bloods' historic rivals, maintain a significant but more fragmented presence in New York facilities. Unlike the structured set system of the Bloods, Crip factions often operate more independently. Investigative reports indicate that while Crip-affiliated inmates coordinate for mutual protection and business interests, their organizational structure tends to be less centralized than their Blood counterparts within the prison environment. Latin gangs constitute another major force in New York's correctional landscape. The Latin Kings, one of the nation's oldest and largest Hispanic gangs, have deep institutional roots. According to law enforcement intelligence and court testimony, the Latin Kings operate with a quasi-military structure inside prisons, with ranks, rules, and strict codes of conduct. Their influence extends across multiple facilities, with leadership hierarchies that span from street chapters to prison blocks. The Trinitarios, originally formed in New York prisons during the early 1990s, represent a uniquely prison-born organization. Founded by Dominican inmates seeking protection from other gangs, the Trinitarios grew from a defensive alliance into one of the most violent and organized groups in the system. Public records and investigative journalism document their evolution from prison protection crew to a sophisticated criminal enterprise operating both inside and outside correctional facilities. The NIDAs, originating in Puerto Rican prisons before spreading to New York, established themselves as a significant force during the 1990s. Court documents and law enforcement reports describe the NIDAs as operating with a structured hierarchy and a stated mission of inmate rights and unity, though prosecutors have documented extensive criminal activity including violence, drug trafficking, and extortion within facilities. Documented cases also reveal the presence of white supremacist groups, though their numbers are smaller compared to other organizations. Groups like the Aryan Brotherhood and various skinhead factions maintain influence in certain facilities, particularly upstate prisons. Their operations, according to investigative reports, focus on racial segregation, protection of white inmates, and contraband control in specific housing units. Muslim prison organizations occupy a complex space in the institutional power structure. While many Muslim groups inside prisons focus on religious practice and positive rehabilitation, law enforcement intelligence has identified certain factions that operate more like traditional gangs. The distinction between legitimate religious practice and gang activity disguised as faith remains a contentious and complicated issue within corrections. The machinery of institutional control. How do these organizations actually control their environment? The mechanisms of power inside New York's jails and prisons operate through several documented systems. Territory control represents the foundation of prison gang power. According to testimony from correctional officers and investigations into facility violence, gangs claim specific housing units, cell blocks, and yard areas. New inmates entering a facility quickly learn which spaces belong to which organizations. Crossing into rival territory without permission can result in violence. This territorial system creates de facto sovereignty within the institution. The contraband economy fuels gang power and provides operational funding. Investigative reports and prosecutions reveal sophisticated smuggling operations bringing drugs, cell phones, weapons, and other prohibited items into facilities. These contraband pipelines involve corruption of some correctional staff, exploitation of visitation procedures, and creative smuggling methods documented in court cases. Cell phones represent particularly valuable contraband. With access to phones, incarcerated gang leaders can maintain direct communication with street operations, coordinate criminal activity, and manage their organizations in real time. Federal and state prosecutions have documented numerous cases where prison gang leaders orchestrated crimes ranging from drug trafficking to murder using contraband phones. Protection rackets operate openly in some facilities. According to testimony from former inmates and investigative journalism, unaffiliated prisoners often must pay gang members for safety. This protection money comes in the form of commissary items, money sent from outside, or services rendered. Those who refuse to pay face violence or exploitation. Recruitment behind bars serves multiple purposes for gang organizations. New members increase an organization's numbers and power within a facility. Young inmates seeking protection or status become targets for sophisticated recruitment efforts. According to former gang members and rehabilitation program staff, the recruitment process often involves offering protection, providing commissary support, and creating a sense of family in an environment of isolation and danger. Violence enforcement maintains gang authority and settles disputes. Documented incidents in New York facilities reveal patterns of targeted assaults, stabbings, and in extreme cases, murders orchestrated by gang leadership. These acts of violence serve as both punishment and deterrent, demonstrating the consequences of crossing gang authority. The communication network between incarcerated members and street operations represents perhaps the most concerning aspect of prison gang power. Court documents from federal racketeering cases demonstrate that prison leaders often maintain operational control over street-level criminal activity. Orders flow from prison to street through visits, contraband phones, coded letters, and intermediaries. In some documented cases, incarcerated gang leaders have ordered murders, drug distribution, and other serious crimes from behind bars. The institutional response and its failures. New York's correctional authorities have implemented various strategies to combat gang influence, with mixed results. Security housing units, commonly known as solitary confinement or the box, were designed partly to isolate gang leaders from their organizations. However, civil rights litigation and reform efforts have limited the use of prolonged isolation. Additionally, investigative reports suggest that even in restrictive housing, determined gang members find ways to communicate and maintain influence. Gang intelligence units within the Department of Corrections work to identify gang members, track organizational structures, and disrupt operations. These units compile databases, monitor communications, and coordinate with law enforcement. However, according to testimony from corrections officials, resource limitations and the sheer scale of gang presence make complete control nearly impossible. Transfer policies attempt to break up gang concentrations by moving leaders and members between facilities. Court records show that this strategy sometimes backfires, spreading gang influence to new institutions rather than containing it. When a gang leader transfers to a new facility, they often establish or strengthen their organization's presence there. The fundamental challenge facing institutional authorities is straightforward. When you concentrate thousands of gang-affiliated individuals in confined spaces with limited legitimate opportunities, alternative power structures will emerge. According to corrections researchers and policy experts, without addressing root causes, education, mental health treatment, substance abuse programming, and meaningful rehabilitation, suppression strategies alone cannot eliminate gang influence. The reality documented in court records, investigative journalism, and official reports is clear. Prison gangs in New York's correctional facilities operate as shadow governments. They provide order in chaos, protection in danger, and opportunity in scarcity. They also perpetuate violence, exploit the vulnerable, and extend criminal enterprises from behind bars into communities. This institutional power didn't emerge from nowhere. It grew from decades of policy failures, social inequalities, and a correctional philosophy focused on punishment rather than rehabilitation. Understanding how these organizations control New York's jails and prisons requires examining not just the gangs themselves, but the system that made their rise possible. The economy of incarceration. Every correctional facility operates two economies. The official economy involves state-issued meals, regulated commissary purchases, and authorized work programs paying pennies per hour. The shadow economy, controlled by gangs, moves millions of dollars worth of contraband annually, creates its own currency systems, and generates profits that flow both inside prison walls and onto the streets. Understanding how prison gangs maintain power in New York's correctional facilities requires examining their economic engine. Money is power everywhere, but behind bars, where official currency is prohibited and resources are scarce, the gang-controlled economy becomes the real measure of influence. The contraband pipeline. The foundation of prison gang economics is contraband smuggling. According to court documents and investigations by the New York State Inspector General, prohibited items enter correctional facilities through multiple channels, each requiring organization, coordination, and often corruption. Drugs represent the highest value contraband category. Investigative reports and prosecutions reveal that substances including synthetic cannabinoids like K2, heroin, cocaine, and prescription medications flow into New York facilities regularly. The markup on drugs behind bars is astronomical. A quantity of K2 worth $50 on the street can sell for $500 or more inside, according to testimony from former inmates and law enforcement officials. Federal prosecutions have documented cases where gang members coordinate drug smuggling through corrupted correctional officers. In one documented case from 2019, multiple officers at Rikers Island were arrested for smuggling contraband including drugs and phones in exchange for thousands of dollars in payments. Court records showed these officers were working directly with gang-affiliated inmates who distributed the contraband and managed the internal market. Visitation provides another smuggling avenue. Investigative journalism and facility incident reports describe methods including items concealed on visitors' bodies, substances dissolved into paper or clothing, and exchanges during contact visits. Gang organizations coordinate these operations, with outside associates preparing contraband packages and incarcerated members receiving and distributing the goods. Mail and package systems, despite screening procedures, have been exploited through increasingly sophisticated methods. Court documents reveal cases where drug-soaked paper was sent through regular mail, appearing as innocent letters until the paper could be smoked or dissolved. Facility investigations have uncovered contraband hidden in book bindings, food packages, and legal mail, which receive special protections under attorney-client privilege. Drones represent an emerging smuggling technology. News reports and facility security briefings document instances where drones delivered packages containing drugs, phones, and other contraband directly to prison yards or through windows. While security measures have improved, the drone threat demonstrates how gang organizations adapt to utilize new technologies. The cell phone network. Contraband cell phones deserve special attention because they serve as the nervous system of prison gang operations. According to investigations by corrections departments and federal prosecutors, thousands of illegal phones operate inside New York facilities at any given time. These phones allow incarcerated gang leaders to maintain real-time control over street operations. Court wiretaps introduced as evidence in federal racketeering cases have captured prison gang leaders ordering drug shipments, directing violence, managing money, and coordinating criminal enterprises as if they were free. In one documented federal case, a blood gang leader incarcerated at an upstate New York prison used contraband phones to run a multi-state drug trafficking operation worth millions of dollars. The phone market itself represents a significant economic sector within prison. According to testimony from correctional investigators, a basic cell phone that costs $100 outside can sell for $1,000 or more inside. Smartphones with internet capability command even higher prices. Gang organizations control this market, selling or renting phones to other inmates and charging for usage. Phone charging presents its own mini-economy. Since inmates cannot legally access electrical outlets for unauthorized devices, creative charging methods have emerged. Investigations have found inmates bribing maintenance workers for outlet access, using modified electrical equipment to tap into institutional power, and even employing corrupted staff to charge devices. Gang members who control charging access extract payments in commissary items or money. The sophistication of phone operations is remarkable. Law enforcement intelligence indicates that some gang leaders maintain multiple phones with different purposes. One for street business, another for prison operations, others for specific associates. They use code words, change numbers regularly, and employ various countermeasures to avoid detection, though many are eventually caught through wiretaps and investigations. Commissary as currency. In New York's correctional facilities where cash is prohibited, the commissary system becomes the primary legitimate currency. Inmates can purchase approved items, food, hygiene products, clothing, electronics, using funds deposited into their accounts by family and friends. According to corrections policy and facility guidelines, these transactions occur through a regulated system. Gang organizations have monetized commissary in multiple ways. The most straightforward is the protection tax. Investigative reports and testimony from former inmates describe how gang members demand regular commissary payments from unaffiliated prisoners in exchange for safety. An inmate might be required to purchase specific items weekly or monthly and hand them over to gang members. Refusal invites violence. Commissary items function as trade goods in the shadow economy. A jar of peanut butter, packages of instant noodles, or containers of coffee become standardized units of exchange. According to former inmates and correctional staff, these items are used to purchase services, settle debts, and compensate for favors. Gang members accumulate these goods through taxation and then use them as capital for further transactions. Debt enforcement represents a darker aspect of the commissary economy. Court documents and incident reports reveal cases where inmates borrowed commissary items or money for their accounts and then became trapped in predatory debt cycles. Interest rates can be extreme. Borrowing items worth $10 might require repaying $20 worth. Gang enforcers ensure debts are paid through threats and violence. Inmates who cannot pay face assault or are forced into servitude, performing tasks for gang members until debts are cleared. The commissary system also facilitates money laundering for gang operations. Federal investigations have documented schemes where gang associates on the outside deposit money into inmate accounts in exchange for services or as payment for drugs sold on the streets. The incarcerated gang member then uses this commissary money to purchase items that are given to other inmates, who have their outside associates deposit money into specific accounts. Through this circular system, street money flows through the prison commissary and back to the streets, obscuring its criminal origins. Gambling and loan sharking. Gambling represents another significant economic activity in New York's correctional facilities. According to former inmates and investigative journalism, betting occurs on everything from sports games to card games to chess matches. Gang members often run these gambling operations, taking percentages of bets or extending credit to gamblers. Sports betting is particularly popular. Inmates watch televised games and place bets using commissary items or account money as stakes. Court testimony indicates that gang members serve as bookies, managing bets, setting odds, and collecting winnings. The institution's official television schedule inadvertently supports this economy by providing the sporting events that generate betting action. Loan sharking operates alongside gambling. When inmates cannot pay gambling debts or need commissary items they cannot afford, gang members provide loans at predatory interest rates. Investigative reports describe interest rates of 50% or higher, with weekly or monthly payment requirements. The violence backing these loans is real. Documented assaults and stabbings have occurred over unpaid gambling and loan debts. Card games and dice games provide more direct gambling opportunities. These games occur in cells, day rooms, and recreation areas, often with gang members controlling who can participate and taking percentages of pots. Correctional staff attempt to disrupt these activities, but the gambling continues, adapting to enforcement patterns. Labor exploitation and service economies. Beyond contraband and commissary, gang organizations exploit prison labor and services. Facility work assignments, kitchen duty, laundry, maintenance, barbering, provide opportunities for gang members to generate income and exert control. Kitchen workers have access to food, which becomes a valuable commodity. According to facility investigations and testimony, gang-affiliated kitchen workers smuggle extra food to allies, sell stolen ingredients to other inmates, and use their position to distribute contraband hidden in food service areas. Control of kitchen assignments means control of food distribution beyond official meals. Barbering services operate as both legitimate prison jobs and shadow economy businesses. While facilities employ official barbers, many inmates prefer cuts and styles that require more skill or time than official barbers provide. Gang members who can cut hair charge commissary items for their services. These transactions occur informally, with gang protection ensuring payment and preventing competition. Laundry services follow similar patterns. While facilities provide basic laundry, gang members offer premium services, better cleaning, faster turnaround, special handling for commissary payments. Control of laundry areas also provides hiding places for contraband and opportunities for smuggling. Cleaning and maintenance positions provide access to institutional areas and tools. Investigations have found that gang-affiliated maintenance workers smuggle tools for weapon manufacturing, access restricted areas to hide contraband, and use their positions to facilitate smuggling operations. These work assignments become valuable gang resources, assigned to trusted members. The Presidio Street financial pipeline. Perhaps the most significant aspect of prison gang economics is how money flows between incarcerated members and street operations. Federal racketeering prosecutions have exposed sophisticated financial systems connecting prison and street. Incarcerated gang leaders maintain control over street-level drug operations, prostitution, robbery crews, and other criminal enterprises. Using contraband phones, they direct these operations and ensure profits continue flowing. Court-authorized wiretaps introduced as evidence demonstrate leaders discussing drug quantities, territory disputes, money collections, and violence, all while incarcerated. Money from street operations supports incarcerated members through commissary deposits, legal fees, and family support. Prosecutors have shown how gang associates deposit funds into inmate accounts as part of organizational obligations. These deposits allow imprisoned leaders to maintain status, purchase contraband, and continue operating within the facility. Some gang organizations operate legitimate businesses that serve as fronts for criminal proceeds. Federal cases have documented everything from barbershops to music labels to clothing lines that function as money laundering operations. Incarcerated leaders maintain ownership or influence over these businesses, with trusted associates managing day-to-day operations and funneling profits back into gang activities. The economic web connecting prison and street is complex and resilient. Law enforcement disrupts individual operations, prosecutes corruption, and seizes assets, but the fundamental economic incentives remain. As long as incarcerated gang leaders can communicate with the outside world and contraband commands premium prices inside, the shadow economy will persist. Institutional economics and gang power. The official prison economy inadvertently strengthens gang control. Low wages for prison jobs, sometimes less than $1 per hour according to state pay schedules, mean most inmates cannot afford substantial commissary purchases without outside support. This economic vulnerability makes the gang economy more attractive and gang protection more necessary. Phone call costs, while reformed in recent years, historically drained inmate and family finances. Before reforms, a 15-minute phone call could cost several dollars. Families struggling to maintain contact faced significant expenses. This created additional incentive for inmates to participate in the shadow economy and for gang members to offer contraband phone access as a valuable service. The economics of incarceration extend beyond the walls. According to criminal justice research and policy analysis, The financial burden on families supporting incarcerated loved ones creates cascading economic effects in already disadvantaged communities. Gang organizations exploit these vulnerabilities, offering support systems that bind members and their families to the organization. The shadow economy in New York's correctional facilities represents more than criminal enterprise. It reflects how gang organizations have created parallel systems providing goods, services, protection, and opportunity in an environment of scarcity and danger. Understanding this economy is essential to understanding gang power, because in prison, as everywhere, money means control. Violence, codes, and the struggle for control. Violence in New York's correctional facilities isn't random chaos. It's calculated, systematic, and serves specific purposes within the gang power structure. Behind every documented assault, stabbing, or murder lies a logic: enforcement of rules, demonstration of power, resolution of disputes, or maintenance of reputation. Understanding this violence means understanding the codes that govern life behind bars and the ongoing struggle between institutional authority and gang control. The language of violence. In the enclosed world of correctional facilities, violence communicates messages that words cannot. According to incident reports, investigative journalism, and testimony from corrections staff, different types of violence serve different functions within the gang ecosystem. Disciplinary violence punishes rule violations within gang organizations. Court documents and facility investigations describe cases where gang members faced assault for infractions like disrespecting leadership, cooperating with authorities, or failing to follow orders. These beatings serve as internal justice systems, enforcing organizational discipline without involving institutional authorities. The severity of punishment corresponds to the severity of the offense. A minor disrespect might result in a beating administered by fellow gang members. More serious violations, stealing from the organization, unauthorized violence, sexual misconduct, can result in severe beatings, stabbings, or in extreme documented cases, murder. These punishments are often carried out publicly or semi-publicly to ensure the message reaches the broader inmate population. Territorial violence maintains gang control over physical spaces within facilities. Investigative reports document conflicts over housing units, recreation yards, and even specific tables and dining halls. When rival gang members enter claimed territory, violence can erupt. These confrontations demonstrate to both rivals and unaffiliated inmates which organization controls which space. Predatory violence targets vulnerable inmates for exploitation. According to testimony from former inmates and prosecutions for crimes committed inside facilities, gang members identify and assault weak or isolated prisoners to establish dominance, extract resources, or force victims into servitude. While facilities have policies against such predation, the sheer numbers of inmates and limitations on supervision create opportunities for exploitation. Retaliatory violence responds to perceived disrespect or previous attacks. The culture of respect is paramount in prison environments. Court records and incident reports reveal cycles of violence where an initial conflict escalates through multiple revenge attacks. Gang affiliations amplify these cycles. An attack on one member can trigger organizational retaliation, leading to prolonged violent conflicts. The weapons trade. Violence requires weapons, and correctional facilities have spawned remarkable ingenuity in weapon manufacturing. Investigations by corrections departments and prosecutions for weapon possession reveal the sophistication of prison-made arms. Shanks and shivs, improvised stabbing weapons, are manufactured from materials available within facilities. According to documented seizures and testimony from security staff, inmates create blades from metal bed frames, sharpened plastic, broken glass, and even hardened paper. Handles are fashioned from cloth, tape, or molded soap. Some weapons discovered during facility searches demonstrate craftsmanship that required hours of secret work. The weapon manufacturing process involves specialized skills. Certain inmates become known as weapon makers, trading their products for commissary items or protection. Gang members control much of this trade, ensuring their organization has access to weapons while potentially denying rivals the same access. Concealment represents a constant challenge and innovation. Weapons must be hidden from routine searches and surprise shakedowns. Investigative reports describe weapons concealed in hollow book bindings, inside electrical fixtures, buried in recreation yards, and taped to body parts. Gang organizations maintain weapon caches, with knowledge of locations restricted to trusted members. The presence of weapons fundamentally alters power dynamics. An armed gang member holds life and death power over unarmed inmates. Correctional staff conducting searches face genuine danger from inmates willing to use violence to protect contraband or avoid consequences. The weapons trade, controlled largely by gang organizations, represents a critical component of their institutional power. The code of silence. Prison culture operates under codes that directly conflict with institutional rules. The most fundamental is the prohibition against cooperating with authorities. This code, often called no snitching or stop snitching, is enforced through severe violence. According to court testimony and facility investigations, inmates who provide information to correctional staff or law enforcement face brutal retaliation. The label of snitch or rat carries extreme consequences. Documented cases reveal beatings, stabbings, and murders of inmates suspected of cooperation with authorities. Gang organizations are particularly ruthless in enforcing this code because their operations depend on secrecy. The fear of being labeled a cooperator creates a wall of silence that frustrates investigations into facility violence and contraband operations. Even victims of serious assaults often refuse to identify attackers or provide testimony. Witness intimidation doesn't require explicit threats. The understood consequences are sufficient deterrent. This code extends beyond prison walls. Federal prosecutions have documented cases where gang members threaten or harm family members of potential witnesses to prevent cooperation with authorities. The reach of gang organizations from inside prison to outside communities makes these threats credible and effective. The institutional impact is significant. According to corrections officials and investigative reports, many violent incidents go unsolved because victims and witnesses refuse to cooperate. Gang members exploit this silence to act with relative impunity, knowing that proving their involvement in violence is extremely difficult without cooperative witnesses. Riots and large-scale violence. While most prison violence involves individual or small group confrontations, New York's correctional history includes episodes of large-scale violence that expose the depth of gang influence and institutional control challenges. The 1990 disturbance at Rikers Island, documented in news reports and official investigations, involved hundreds of inmates and revealed gang organizations' ability to mobilize members quickly. While not entirely gang-orchestrated, the incident demonstrated how gang networks could spread information, coordinate actions, and challenge institutional authority on a large scale. More recent incidents, though smaller in scale, continue to demonstrate gang coordination. Facility lockdowns often follow intelligence about planned gang conflicts. According to corrections officials and incident reports, gang rivalries can escalate to the point where administrators must separate entire housing units to prevent mass violence. The threat of coordinated violence gives gang leaders leverage in negotiations with facility administrators. Investigative journalism and testimony from corrections staff reveal instances where implicit understandings develop. Gang leaders maintain basic order in exchange for certain accommodations or reduced enforcement of minor rules. This represents a troubling concession of authority, but one that administrators sometimes accept to prevent worse outcomes. Sexual violence and exploitation. Sexual violence represents one of the most disturbing aspects of prison gang activity. According to investigations by the Justice Department under the Prison Rape Elimination Act, sexual assault occurs in correctional facilities at rates higher than official statistics suggest due to underreporting. Gang members are both perpetrators and sometimes protectors regarding sexual violence. Court documents and facility investigations reveal cases where gang members sexually assault vulnerable inmates as demonstrations of power or as punishment. In other documented cases, gang members provide protection from sexual predators in exchange for commissary payments or loyalty. The exploitation of LGBTQ inmates presents particular concerns. Investigative reports and advocacy organization research indicate that LGBTQ individuals in men's facilities face disproportionate risk of sexual violence. Gang protection can be life-saving for these vulnerable populations, but it often comes at the cost of economic exploitation or forced participation in gang activities. Corrections policies including housing segregation for vulnerable populations and enhanced monitoring aim to reduce sexual violence. However, according to civil rights litigation and oversight reports, implementation remains inconsistent across New York's facilities, and gang members continue to exploit enforcement gaps. Institutional countermeasures. New York's correctional authorities employ multiple strategies to combat gang violence and control, with varying degrees of success. Understanding these efforts and their limitations provides context for why gang power persists despite institutional opposition. Intelligence gathering forms the foundation of gang control efforts. According to Corrections Department policy and staff testimony, gang intelligence units identify gang members, track organizational structures, monitor communications, and analyze patterns. This intelligence informs housing decisions, transfer policies, and security responses. Database systems catalog known gang members, their affiliations, and their activities. When inmates enter facilities, intelligence checks determine if they pose gang-related security risks. However, civil liberties advocates have raised concerns about accuracy of gang databases and due process protections for inmates labeled as gang members. Restrictive housing, commonly known as solitary confinement or security housing units, is used to isolate gang leaders and disruptive members from the general population. The theory holds that separating leaders from followers will disrupt gang operations. Court documents and policy debates reveal this approach's controversial nature. It can reduce some gang activity but also raises serious mental health and human rights concerns. Recent reforms have limited the use and duration of solitary confinement in New York facilities. According to settlement agreements in civil rights litigation and legislative changes, prolonged isolation is now restricted, particularly for vulnerable populations. These reforms, while important for humane treatment, have complicated efforts to control gang leadership. Transfer policies attempt to disrupt gang operations by moving members between facilities. The strategy aims to separate leaders from their power bases and prevent gang consolidation in specific institutions. However, investigative reports suggest this can backfire by spreading gang influence to new facilities rather than containing it. Surveillance technology including cameras, metal detectors, and communications monitoring has expanded. According to facility security briefings and equipment contracts, modern institutions employ sophisticated monitoring systems. Yet the sheer volume of inmates, limited staff resources, and gang adaptation strategies mean technology alone cannot eliminate gang activity. Staff training programs educate correctional officers about gang identification, tactics, and appropriate responses. These programs, mandated by corrections policy, aim to ensure staff can recognize and counter gang activity. However, as testimony from officers reveals, training often struggles to keep pace with evolving gang strategies and the complexity of institutional gang dynamics. Corruption and compromise. The struggle for control includes a troubling element: corruption of correctional staff. Federal and state prosecutions have exposed numerous cases where correctional officers, administrators, and other staff members were compromised by gang organizations. Financial corruption involves staff smuggling contraband in exchange for money. Court documents reveal cases where officers received thousands of dollars to bring drugs, phones, and other prohibited items into facilities. Gang organizations target financially vulnerable staff, offering payments that can exceed officers' legitimate salaries. Intimidation represents another corruption vector. According to testimony in prosecutions of gang members and corrupted staff, gang organizations sometimes threaten staff members or their families to compel cooperation. Officers who refuse to smuggle contraband or who aggressively enforce rules against gang members may face threats of violence extending beyond prison walls. Sexual relationships between staff and inmates, while always involving a power imbalance that makes true consent impossible, sometimes develop through gang manipulation. Investigative reports document cases where gang members cultivated relationships with staff members, then exploited those relationships to smuggle contraband or obtain favors. The impact of staff corruption cannot be overstated. A single corrupted officer can undermine security measures, facilitate substantial contraband operations, and strengthen gang power throughout an entire facility. According to corrections administrators and oversight bodies, combating corruption requires constant vigilance, thorough screening, and a culture of integrity. The cycle continues. Despite institutional efforts, gang control in New York's correctional facilities persists because the fundamental conditions supporting gang power remain largely unchanged. Overcrowding continues in many facilities. Programming and rehabilitation opportunities remain limited. The pathway from street to prison and back to street continues, with gang affiliations surviving and strengthening through the cycle. Violence, codes, and the struggle for control define daily reality in New York's jails and prisons. Gang organizations have adapted to every countermeasure, exploited every institutional weakness, and maintained power through decades of policy changes. The question facing corrections officials, policymakers, and society is whether the current approach can ever truly succeed, or whether fundamentally different strategies are required to break gang power and transform correctional facilities from battlegrounds into places of genuine rehabilitation and safety.